Well, welcome to the 700 Club. An absolute monster. That's what President Trump has said Hurricane Dorian is looking like, and Florida is right in the crosshairs.
The potentially Cat 4 storm has residents all along the cone of uncertainty scrambling to prepare and bracing for the worst this holiday weekend. Here's Jennifer Wishon with the storm's growing threat.
Here it is, Hurricane Dorian moving slowly over open, warm waters. That's fueling her strength as she swirls towards Florida. By the time she strikes on Monday, Dorian could be a Category 4 storm, packing winds of more than 130 miles per hour.
Slow is never our friend. So what that means is you'll have a longer period of time where you can get some of those hurricane force winds.
The National Hurricane Center is getting real-time data from NOAA's hurricane hunters.
We have 2 planes flying 24-hour operations into, around, and through these hurricanes.
Now it's looking like it could be an absolute monster.
President Trump canceled his scheduled trip to Poland this weekend to monitor the storm. He assures the federal government is pre-positioning and ready to respond.
All indications are it's going to hit very hard, and it's going to be very big.
In Florida, a rush to board up and get supplies. An exercise in patience and frustration as some gas stations run out of fuel.
You have no idea what you're going to get through.
CBN's Operation Blessing U.S. disaster team is deploying to Central Florida today. A team of volunteers taking a generator-powered shower trailer, 35-foot truck full of food and disaster relief supplies, and a work order trailer with gear to serve impacted communities.
We actually have supplies that volunteers can just show up with the shirts on their back and go out and serve the community.
He's praying the storm turns away, but if it does hit, Operation Blessing is prepared to stay and serve impacted communities for months if needed.
Overall mission is to end human suffering down there in the disaster-related area. And how we do that is by setting up distribution centers that have non-perishable items along with hygiene products and cleaning supplies to hand out to the community.
For so many, this holiday weekend will be used to prepare and brace for the worst. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Well, we need to prepare for the worst because this is going to be a monster storm. The local communities there are advising residents to stock at least a week's worth of food and water in preparation for this. And Operation Blessing is there, and we're there in your name. If you'd like to help with advanced preparation for this monster storm, you can write to us, Operation Blessing, Disaster Relief Fund, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463, or you can call us right now, 1-800-700-7000, or visit cbn.com. Well, in other news, authorities in Hong Kong are moving against the pro-democracy movement. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. Hong Kong police arrested several prominent pro-democracy leaders this morning. 2 of them, Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, were taken into custody for their role in an unlawful protest outside a police station. Wong is a well-known Christian and democracy activist. Both have been granted bail. Meanwhile, police denied permission for another demonstration this Saturday. Last weekend, they used tear gas, water cannons, and live rounds as warning shots against the protesters. And fresh troops from China deployed to Hong Kong Thursday, the Chinese claiming it's a routine troop rotation amid worries of a crackdown by Beijing. While in Lebanon, a Hezbollah leader is threatening to attack Israel. The Iranian-backed terror group claims it doesn't want a new war, but as Chris Mitchell reports, tensions are high and a misstep could trigger an armed conflict.
Israel releases video to show how Hezbollah's inaccurate missiles could be manufactured into missiles capable of striking an Israeli target within a few yards. Changing Hezbollah's massive military inventory into precision-guided weapons would be a game changer.
We're determined to eliminate this dangerous project. The aim of the publication today is to convey that we will not sit by and allow our enemies to arm themselves with deadly weapons directed at us.
The intelligence explains why an Israeli drone destroyed a key part of this missile program just a few days ago. One of the latest incidents raising tension in the region to its highest in years. A recent example that a shadow war involving Iran, its Middle East allies, and Israel is coming into the light.
We are now seeing a situation in which a kind of regional conflict involving a whole series of Iranian proxies and allies, including Hezbollah, all of which threaten Israel, are basically on the brink of what could be a bad misstep for either side and could bring the region to another conflict.
We're challenged on three fronts, and Israel has all the right in the world to defend itself, and we will.
Former Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat, a prominent member of Prime Minister Netanyahu's party, says Israel is fighting for its survival.
It's very clear that Iran, that their goal is to destroy the state of Israel, the radical Islam. They're using their proxies in Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and many of the regimes, the Shiite regimes in Syria, to create infrastructure and to prepare to strike on Israel.
Recently, Netanyahu told Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah to relax. Barkat says that's code for be careful.
If they start and initiate a round of violence, Israel will make sure that violence does not pay, and they will pay a heavy, heavy price. And I think Nasrallah knows that very, very well.
Hezbollah's deputy leader warned Israel to expect a calculated strike, but that he wanted to avoid a new war with Israel. These strikes, however, are not an exact science, and some feel that a miscalculation could once again plunge the region into war. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. The Justice Department does not plan to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey, even though a new report says he broke protocol when he handed over a memo about his private conversations with the president to a friend with instructions to pass it along to the media. The memo included the president's request that Comey not investigate former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The day after that news became public, Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel. The report said by not safeguarding sensitive information and by using it to create public pressure for official action, Comey set a dangerous example for both current and former FBI employees who similarly have access to or knowledge of non-public information. President Trump says Comey is disgraced and excoriated by the report. However, the Inspector General found that none of the information Comey shared was classified. Well, this month marks 400 years since the first enslaved Africans were brought to the English colony of Virginia. Across the country, communities paused to reflect the history of slavery in America and to seek healing for its wounds. Charlene Aaron has a story.
August marked 400 years since the first enslaved Africans reached American shores at Point Comfort, known today as Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Many are learning about that history while commemorating its painful past. From the Washington Cathedral to Atlanta, Georgia, bells rang out across the country, marking the 400th anniversary of the first Africans who arrived as slaves on the shores of Virginia.
They were enslaved while they were on the White Lion. When they disembarked, there was no status for them at that point in time. So they were traded for foodstuff, and two of them, they were secured in terms of property by William Tucker, who was the commander.
Historian Bill Wiggins says those two enslaved people, Anthony and Isabella, were Catholics from Angola, who later became husband and wife, although not legally.
In 1623, they bore the first African documented child in English-occupied North America. That child, William Tucker, named after Captain Tucker, in honor of him, was baptized in the Second Kecoughtan Anglican Church.
This Hampton Cemetery is where some say members of that first family are buried. Wanda Tucker believes William Tucker was her ancestor.
400 years later, we're telling these stories, and we need to be acknowledged for our contributions for the building of America.
Thousands recently gathered here to reflect on the country's dark past. Terry Brown serves as the superintendent for the Fort Monroe National Monument. He says all Americans of all races should consider the importance of this anniversary.
To be in a place where the first Africans landed, I can't explain to you the emotion that brings up. I mean, I've struggled with this at times because they landed in the same spot I work in.
Hundreds of years after those first slaves arrived here, this same peninsula became a refuge for enslaved people during the Civil War.
The first three men that escaped to freedom came here to Fort Monroe at the outbreak of the Civil War. 10,000 enslaved people followed them to what they called freedom's fortress.
Meanwhile, many hope that freedom continues to pave the way for greater healing for our nation's future.
If a nation can hear our plight and our journey and our accomplishments, maybe on some level, in some small way, we begin to humanize each other and we begin to heal this nation.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Gordon, this reminds me of that verse in Psalms that says how good and pleasant it is for people to dwell in unity.
We need unity, but that needs to be an understanding unity. I grew up in Virginia, and we were taught in school that 1619 was the red letter year. It was actually a celebrated year for three reasons. The first and foremost was women finally came to the colonies, so the settlers could actually marry, and that was considered a wonderful thing. The second thing is the first elected assembly happened in 1619, so it's the birth of democracy. But on the awful side, and it's a horrific side, slaves were introduced into the colony, and it started a long nightmare, and we're just beginning to recover from that. It's been 400 years since the introduction, but a little more than 150 years since the Emancipation Proclamation. And then we actually needed to pass an amendment to the Constitution to say that slavery was no longer allowed in the United States. We need to understand this history. We need to understand how horrific it was. We need to have that kind of memorial for it. And then admiration for the people that survived it. And what an incredible thing to come out of that kind of horror and say, we can still make a hope, we can still make a future. It's that kind of information, that kind of understanding that will ultimately lead to unity. Tara?
That was wonderful. I think the man who said he struggled sometimes with the fact that he now works where it all began, but I actually think that's quite a wonderful tribute, that he is standing there, that he's telling the story, that he's making it known. Pretty wonderful.